Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the importance of accuracy in language. In 1874, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote a monumental short pamphlet entitled On the Use and Abuse of History. I reread it every year. The lessons learned from this reading are humbling. Had he been alive today, Nietzsche may have been moved to write a follow-up, this one entitled On the Use and Abuse of Holocaust and Genocide. The terms genocide and Holocaust are bandied about today with no real understanding. Every death is not a Holocaust. Every bad person is not a Nazi, nor is every right-wing leader a Hitler. That is where the abuse of history becomes relevant. Words are important. Throwing around words like genocide or Holocaust should not be taken casually. The term genocide was coined by Raphael Lemkin, probably in 1943. He published the term for the first time in his work. It was an essay called The Axis Rule in Occupied Europe in 1943. In that essay, he documents the Nazis' murder of the Jews. It was Lemkin who, after escaping Poland and finding refuge in the United States, at Duke University actually, became the driving force in the Genocide Convention. Lemkin was motivated not only by the Nazis, but he was also motivated by the Armenian genocide by the Turks in World War I. He wanted to make certain that deeds such as these would never again be perpetrated. The word Lemkin created was a part Greek, part Latin word. Genos is Greek for clan, family. Actually, Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian and geographer, uses genos to mean family or family line, sort of clan. And of course, side is from the Latin citium, which means to kill. Holocaust has a different derivation. After World War II ended, groups of people, historians, committed to documenting the atrocities that were perpetrated on the Jews at the hands of the Nazis and their collaborators emerged. The original term they used to describe the events was the catastrophe in English. The first Yad Vashem publications in English on the Holocaust were actually termed Studies in the Catastrophe. However, soon caught on another word. The word Holocaust actually derives from the Greek word holocauston, which derives from the Hebrew word olah. The Hebrew word is a type of sacrifice which was completely consumed by fire, hence the name olah, and then from there to Holocaust. Interestingly, the original Hebrew used to describe the Holocaust was not Shoah, but Chorban. Chorban means destruction, but it connotes the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem. Babylon destroyed the first temple in 586, and Rome, the second temple, in 70 CE. The word Chorban resonated in a way that connected the Holocaust to a past Jewish catastrophes. Those searching for a better word, a better term in Hebrew, wanted to describe a unique historical event. The Holocaust was different, it was unique. And the word in Hebrew, like in English, needed to stand on its own. It was at this stage that the word Shoah emerged as the common term in Hebrew to refer to the Holocaust. The Genocide Convention of 1948 was established in order to prevent the atrocities that took place during the Holocaust. 152 countries signed on to the treaty. The text is very clear and unambiguous. It reads, acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Although the first stage of the proceedings in the case brought by South Africa against Israel for perpetrating genocide against the Gazans is now over, the case is far from over. The intent was the missing element in the charge brought by South Africa. Israel was not targeting a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. They are targeting Hamas, a terrorist group, and its leaders. This ruling from the ICJ in The Hague referred to a, quote, humanitarian catastrophe, unquote, taking place in Gaza, but came far short of calling it a genocide, because it was not a genocide, because it is not a genocide. South Africa's charge is a gargantuan misuse and abuse of the word genocide, of the Genocide Convention, and of the law. The entire strategy was rhetorical, one-dimensional, and simplistic. It went like this. If so many people in Gaza died at the hands of Israel, it is plain and simple genocide. The problem is, that is not genocide. It lacks intent. The Genocide Convention further defines genocide as 5 items. 1. Killing members of the group. 2. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. 3. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. 4. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And 5. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Intent is everything in this type of law, not the end results. In murder, manslaughter, self-defense, the results are all the same. Someone died. The difference is the intention. South Africa has its own reasons for bringing this case, and they should be ashamed, as should all those who supported and promote the idea that Israel is perpetrating a genocide. Abusers of history and the Holocaust and perpetrators of false rhetoric will continue on their missions. And now, the abusers of genocide have joined their ranks. Their invective and their condemnations have nothing to do with truth and justice. They are simply motivated by hatred. Jew hatred. Coming up next, points of view. First up is an editorial from the Jerusalem Post published on January 28, 2024, and it's entitled, "The ICJ Ruling is a Mixed Bag," editorial, and then subtitle, "The ICJ ruling requires Israel to prevent and punish any public incitement to commit genocide against Palestinians, to preserve evidence related to the allegations of genocide, and to facilitate aid." Now remember, an editorial is unsigned and is the opinion of the editorial board. The Jerusalem Post editors quite naturally are addressing the decision of the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, and call it a mixed bag that could have been much worse for Israel. And as I mentioned earlier in my background briefing, I believe, given the situation, it's the best possible outcome for Israel. This is how the editorial begins. Friday's interim ruling by the International Court of Justice at The Hague on charges of genocide that South Africa brought against Israel is a mixed bag. It has both negative and positive implications for Israel. It could have been better, but it could also have been much worse. On the one hand, the United Nations top court ruled that Israel must take all measures to avoid acts of genocide, prevent death and destruction, and improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Alternatively, it declined to order Israel to suspend its military operations in Gaza and did insist that Hamas and other armed groups immediately release the hostages still being held there. Now the editorial continues by listing what the ICJ should have decided and written in their judgment, but did not. The Jerusalem Post continues. Then again, it did not order Hamas to halt its indiscriminate rocket and terrorist attacks against Israeli civilians. But the ICJ did instruct Israel to submit a report in 1 month on the progress it is making on the so-called provisional measures to avoid killing Palestinians and augment humanitarian aid. Now the editors quote parts of the ICJ's decision, and the editorial continues. At least some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel and Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the Genocide Convention. The judges ruled, according to the court's president, Joan E. Donoghue of the United States, at least 15 of the 17 judges ruled in favor of imposing certain provisional measures on Israel. The court is acutely aware of the extent of the human tragedy that is unfolding in the region and is deeply concerned about the continuing loss of life and human suffering, Donoghue declared. The editorial explains what Israel is now required to do, which is to prevent incitement to commit genocide. The editorial continues. The ICJ ruling requires Israel to prevent and punish any public incitement to commit genocide against Palestinians in Gaza and to preserve evidence related to any allegations of genocide there, as well as to take measures to ease the humanitarian situation for Gazan civilians. The most unusual aspect of the entire case is that Uganda was the only country that joined Israel and voted against the case. Actually, Uganda voted against all 6 charges. Even Aaron Barak, the judge from Israel, voted in favor of 2 charges and against 4. Back to the editorial. Julia Sabindinte of Uganda was the sole judge to vote against all 6 measures adopted by the court, while Israel's ad hoc representative, former Israeli Supreme Court President Aaron Barak, voted against 4 but supported 2 others. Barak now explains why he voted for those 2 charges. They quote him saying, "I have voted in favor in hope that the measure will help decrease tensions and discourage damaging rhetoric." Barak wrote to explain his vote in favor of an order for humanitarian aid and another for the prevention of inflammatory speech. Subdidim said in her dissenting opinion, quote, "The acts allegedly committed by Israel were not accompanied by any genocidal intent. The response in Jerusalem to the ruling was defiant." Although the Prime Minister ordered ministers not to comment on the ruling without approval, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir posted on X, "Hague Schmeig," echoing the contemptuous comment made by Israel's founding Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, about the UN when he said, Shmum. The Palestinian Authority welcomed the ruling, with Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki saying the ICJ ruled in favor of humanity and international law, whereby South Africa deemed it a significant milestone in the search for justice for the Palestinian people. In conclusion, the editorial asks what it really means and concludes that whatever the decision of the ICJ are, they are unenforceable. So what now? The UN Security Council has scheduled a meeting for Wednesday to discuss the ICJ decision. UN Security Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed that the ruling is legally binding and he trusts Israel to take all measures within its power to prevent genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. Though there is now a legal precedent for international pressure on Israel to comply with the ruling, experts say it's not practically enforceable, and the United States is expected to veto any Security Council resolution calling on Israel to stop the war so long as 136 hostages are still being held in Gaza. Next up is a column by Nir Bohms and Shaina Aryan. This column, too, was published in the Jerusalem Post. It ran on January 17th, 2024. It's entitled, "When it comes to Israel, the people of Iran go against their Ayatollahs." Subtitled, "Israeli-Palestinian conflict serves as main instrument in the attempt to galvanize Iran, as well as Muslims and others." It's hard to imagine this, but the people of Iran seem to support Israel in their war against Hamas. Palestinian causes are not very important to Iranians, especially after October 7th. It's an amazing essay. This is how the authors begin. For the past 44 years, the Islamic regime in Iran has tried to foment hatred toward Israel, both at home and abroad, dedicating vast resources to its hateful anti-Israel campaign. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict serves as the main instrument in this attempt to galvanize both Iranians as well as Muslims and others around the world. While it's clear that Iran is able to support a wide proxy network that actively participates in the war against Israel, it is less clear how successful it has been regionally, as well as globally, in advancing an anti-Israel agenda. One thing, however, is certain. Domestically, Iran's anti-Israel campaign has been a failure. Anti-Israel propaganda is embedded within the system developed by the Islamic regime. From school textbooks to billboards, on virtually every street, from official political speeches to religious sermons in mosques, from newspaper editorials and TV programs to movie theaters, Iranians are constantly bombarded with all kinds of anti-Israel propaganda. The hatred of Israel goes hand in hand with Iranian policy supporting the struggle against Israel, a policy that includes investing billions in proxies in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Gaza, and the West Bank. Iran has been deeply involved in supporting Hamas and with the current war in Gaza, which Iran proxies actively pursue. As such, the Islamic regime would like all Iranians to hate Israel. However, much of this effort has backfired. An Israel card, rather than being a slogan that embodies the support for the regime, actually became a symbol for the Iranian opposition effort that seeks to change the regime and its priorities. The signs of this failure have been prevalent for years. In 2009, the Green Movement carried signs with slogans like "No to Gaza, no to Lebanon, I give my life to Iran," which was shouted by thousands during the anti-government demonstrations. The slogan, which protested the set of priorities of the Islamic Republic, became iconic and was widely used as it reflected a simple desire for Iran to come first. With roughly 1 million unemployed college graduates and 47% inflation rate in 2023, the Iranian people have grown tired of large-scale government spending on terror and other people's wars. The next day, during a soccer match, officials tried again to encourage the crowd to support the Palestinian cause by parading a large Palestinian flag. It backfired again when crowds of young fans started shouting insulting slogans towards the officials, chanting in unison, "Take the Palestinian flag and shove it up your..." A clip of the incident immediately started to circulate online. Similar incidents were repeated in other stadiums when young people shouted anti-Palestinian slogans. Even clips of high school students started to go viral, where school officials were encouraging students to shout "Death to Israel," with students replying "Death to Palestine." In their conclusions, the authors explain that this trend has been going on for years. They assert that the Iranian people are not the same as their leadership. They write, "For many years now, the Iranian people have been trying to demonstrate to the world that they neither support nor condone the policies and actions of the Islamic regime. In fact, they want nothing to do with the worldview and sentiments of the revolutionaries who brought the Islamic revolt to fruition." The support given to Israel after the October 7th attacks is yet another clear signal to the world of an enormous schism between the Iranian people and the Islamic regime of Iran. Iranians wish nothing to do with the Islamic regime, the revolution that brought it into existence, nor the mentality of activists who supported it. The authors assert that Hamas in Gaza is similar to the Islamic leadership in Iran. That's why Iran sponsors Hamas. They write, "Similar to the Islamist regime in Gaza, the Islamic Republic in Tehran has brought nothing but pain, suffering, and destruction to its people and the region at large. Iranians have long realized it. The question is, will the free world realize it as well?" Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 6 cartoons and memes and headlines today. First up is a cartoon. It depicts Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu being hit by the ICJ gavel being launched by South Africa by a slingshot. The cartoonist is 100% correct. South Africa is using the ICJ to attack Israel. Next up is a cartoon of Hamas in a director's chair shouting at the Red Cross vehicles at the hostages who are being released to smile. As we know, the smiles were all a sham, a PR stunt. Hamas actually drugged the hostages before freeing them. The drugs made them happy. That's why we saw hostages hugging and high-fiving their Hamas kidnappers. Next up is another cartoon of Bibi Netanyahu. This time, he's trying to negotiate for the release of hostages. He says, "Here's my deal. You take me and free all the hostages." And all the Hamas people behind him are saying, "No, no, 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 no." Now a meme from the Babylon Bee, a very funny satirical website. We see someone sitting in his car in the traffic caused by pro-Hamas protesters. He says, you know, these fine citizens may really have a point. I'd like to learn more about their cause. Thinks driver blocked by protesters for 3 hours. Yes, those protests really stimulate thought. This next is a real picture, not a cartoon, a counter-protester against Hamas. The counter-protester holds up a banner that reads, "From the sea to the river, soup, knedlach, and chopped liver," with an Israeli flag at the bottom. That's very, very funny. Personally, I would have written also cholent kishka and chopped liver. But this version works well too. This last piece I thought was a lampoon. I checked and looked it up, and indeed it is correct. It's not a lampoon. This comes from the Harvard magazine. The article is called "Abolish the White Race." The subtitle reads, "Make no mistake about it, we intend to keep bashing the dead white males and the live ones, and the females too, until the social construct known as the white race is destroyed, not deconstructed, but destroyed." What has happened to our universities? In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Iran has detained a foreign vessel carrying 2 million liters of smuggled fuel near its southern port, city of Bushehr. Iran's Tanzim news agency reported this. Iran, which is some of the world's cheapest fuel prices due to heavy subsidies and the plunge in the value of its natural currency, has been fighting rampant fuel smuggling by land to neighboring countries and by sea to the Gulf Arab states. Iran is fighting to stop the smuggling of their fuel exports. This is an amazing figure and stunning. Some 80% of the tunnels built by Hamas in Gaza have not been destroyed. That's a report of the Wall Street Journal, which recently reported that the Wall Street Journal was quoting Israeli and American officials. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. I want to show you a video of Yehoram Gaon, one of Israel's most beloved singers, now retired, performing with several IDF choirs. The video was just made and has become a huge hit in Israel. The song they sing is called Lo Tinatzchu Oti, You Will Not Defeat Me. The words and music are not new. They were written by none other than Naomi Shemer, the greatest songwriter, poet of this era. She's the artist who composed Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, Jerusalem the Gold. The combination of Naomi Shemer, words, song, and Yehoram Gaon's voice, one of the great balladeers of Israel, whose voice is immediately recognizable to anyone in Israel, and the IDF choirs, is very powerful and very significant. Don't misunderstand the meaning of the song. The message is Israel will not simply roll over, and in the end, Israel will win. Yehoram Gaon, Lo Tinatzchu Oti.
בחלוני אני רואה רחוב כמו נהר גואה ואנשים לעבודת יומם הולכים ותינוקות של בית רבם עם הילקוט שעל גבם ובידיהם כמה ענפי ההדס פורחים פתאום זה בא ומתבהר ולעצמי אני אומר לא, לא, לא תנצחו אותי לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר לא, לא, לא תנצחו אותי לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר בחלוני אני רואה מטוס ממריא מטוס גואל ומתחבא בעננים הרחוקים אני שומע מכונה
והמנגינה הנכונה שמתגלגלת בחוצות ובשווקים. אבל פתאום זה מתבהר, ולעצמי אני אומר, לא, לא, לא תנצחו אותי, לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר. לא, לא, לא תנצחו אותי, לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר.
בחלומי אביב וסתיו, ויום גשום ויום שרב, ואור בחושך ויחיד ומקהלה. זה מתערבב, זה מתערבב, שירי קינה, שירי הלב. ולפעמים זו המולה אחת גדולה.
אבל פתאום זה מתבהר, ולעצמי אני אומר, לא, לא, לא תנצחו אותי, לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר. לא, לא, לא תנצחו אותי, לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר. לא, לא, לא תנצחו אותי, לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר. לא, לא, לא תנצחו אותי, לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר. לא מנצחים אותי כל כך מהר.
Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.